United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Treasurer Aldrich, will you call the roll, please?
Brianna Maxwell,
Present.
Spencer Kingery,
Present.
and Mayor Whirling.
Present. First order of business is the reading of the minutes from December 4th. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
No.
I have none. Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And I am an aye, motion carries. Next are the claims. There are two claims, actually, totaling $285,285.50. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I will second it.
Any questions?
What exactly is it for?
So these are the first disbursements for the interurban project, and would like to get those on the docket tonight so that we can start the reimbursement process. They're ready. These are part of the matching grant program. Any other questions? So we have a motion from Brianna. Did you second?
Yep.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And I'm an aye, motion carries. The next order of business is a disciplinary hearing, and we will get that underway. The date is Thursday, December 14th, 5 o'clock p.m., second floor of the City Building, 201 South Union Street. And as you are aware, the proceedings are being recorded. So this is a disciplinary hearing on the record for the disposition of charges against Officer Shane Bernhardt, and as requested, a public meeting by Officer Bernhardt. This is a hearing conducted before the Board of Works with the mayor presiding over the matter. Members of the audience are advised that public comment is not permitted. Anyone who disrupts or interrupts the proceedings will be asked to leave. The identity of all persons in attendance. I'm the presiding officer, Mayor Whirling. And to my left is Board Member Spencer Kingery. And to my right, Board Member Brianna Maxwell. Attorneys present. Representing the Board of Works. Michael Dean, representing the City of Delphi. Elizabeth Bemis, representing Officer Bernhardt. Officer Shane Bernhardt. Chief Nate Lamar, present. And with that, we will begin getting underway. So, Chief, Nate Lamar, were written charges presented to Officer Shane Bernhardt?
Yes, Mayor.
I will now read those charges. Notice of the chief's charges. Pursuant to Indiana Code 36-8-3-4, Chief Lamar notifies Shane Bernhardt and the City of Delphi Board of Public Works and Safety that he charges that on 9/22/23, Officer Shane Bernhardt sent a text message to Officer Justin Wilson that read, "Got a deal for you. I need DTs, and you're probably not going to have a class, so I'll sign off on EVO if you sign off on DTs." End quote. An affirmative response by Officer Justin Wilson would lead both officers to lie under affirmation and implicate both officers in perjury. 35-44, 1-2-1, paragraph A1, a level 6 felony fraud, Indiana Code 35-43-5-4, Section 7A and C. Officer Shane Bernhardt's conduct described in this preceding paragraph constitutes a violation of rules, as this term is used in Indiana Code 36-8-3-4, paragraph B, 2B. Specifically, 306, performance of duty. Any member who, in the performance of his duties, displays reluctance to properly perform his assigned duties, acts in a manner tending to bring discredit upon himself or the department, or fails to assume responsibility or exercise diligence, intelligence, and interest in the pursuit of his duties, may be deemed incompetent and shall be subject to reduction in rank, suspension, or dismissal from the department. 404, violation of law. No member shall willfully conspire to violate, attempt to violate, or violate any federal statute, state law, or local ordinance, or omit to do any act required by law. 402, general behavior. No member shall act or behave privately or in any official capacity in such a manner as to bring discredit upon himself or the department. Next, neglect of disobedience of orders, as this term is used in Indiana Code 36-8-3-4, paragraph B, 2C. Specifically, 311, obedience. Every member shall strictly obey and promptly execute any lawful order issued by a ranking officer or person of proper authority. B, the term lawful order shall be construed as an order in keeping with the performance of any duty prescribed by law or policies and procedures, special orders or directives, or the preservations of order, efficiency, and proper discipline. Number 411, neglect of duty. No member shall deliberately or grossly neglect his assigned duty, nor act in an incompetent manner when in the performance of those assigned duties. Immoral conduct, as this term is used in Indiana Code 36-8-3-4, B2F, specifically 324, soliciting reward. No member shall solicit any reward for the performance of his duties individually or collectively. Conduct on becoming an officer, as this term is used in Indiana Code 36-8-3-4, paragraph B, 2-8. Specifically, 319, untruthfulness. Members shall not make false or incomplete statements to ranking officers or their designee when questioned, interviewed, or in submitting reports. If untruthfulness is determined, disciplinary action may be taken. Action may include reduction in rank, reprimand, suspension, or dismissal from the department. False information in records. No member shall make false official records or knowingly or willingly enter or cause to be entered in any department books, records, or reports any inaccurate, false, or improper information or material matter. If false information in records is determined, disciplinary action may be taken. Action may include reduction in rank, reprimand, suspension, or dismissal from the department. Number 410, Code of Professional Ethics. B-3, members shall regard their office as a public trust and in the discharge of their duties be consistently mindful of their primary obligation to serve the public efficiently and faithfully. The chief therefore asks the board to advise the officer of his statutory rights and therefore recommends the termination of Shane Bernhardt from the Delphi Police Department. That is signed by Chief Nate Lamar. Officer Bernhardt, do you understand the charges?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have a plea on those charges?
Not guilty?
We would like to inform you that you will be asked questions specifically directed and narrowly related to the performance of your official duties or fitness for office. You are entitled to all the rights and privileges guaranteed by the laws of the Constitution of this state and the Constitution of the United States, including the right not to be compelled to incriminate yourself. If you refuse to answer questions at this time that directly relate to the performance of your official duties or fitness for duty, You will be subject to departmental disciplinary charges, which could result in your dismissal from the department. Do you understand these rights?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand that any statements you make, whether they indicate violation of rules or regulations or violations of criminal law, may be used against you in any subsequent department charges?
Yes, ma'am.
With that, we will begin opening statements, beginning with the prosecution.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just intended as an overview of what I expect the evidence to be. It's not necessarily every fact that you'll hear. It's not necessarily every bit of evidence that you'll get with exhibits. But essentially where everything begins is that police officers are required on an annual basis to attend certain mandatory training. The mandatory training includes training for what's called EVO, or Emergency Vehicle Operation, as well as what's referred to in law enforcement as DT, or Defensive Tactics. The training that's required is put on by certified law enforcement instructors. The instructors, again, on the annual basis are required to sign off on each individual law enforcement officer's completion for that mandatory program training each year. The training is, I think you'll hear, relatively straightforward and simple. It's not largely time-consuming. It's made widely available several times a year. Officers here in the Delphi Police Department have numerous opportunities each year to have that completed. And Officer Justin Wilson, who's one of our witnesses, is a certified defensive tactics instructor. He goes out of his way to make sure it's available even in January, so officers can get it done early, get it out of the way for the year. Aside from Officer Wilson, Officer Bernhardt, in addition to being a police officer, is also a certified emergency vehicle, or EVO, operation instructor. So he also puts on classes and make those available for law enforcement officers to complete their annual training. This event stems from that mandatory training in that back sometime prior to September 22nd of this year, Officer Justin Wilson was seriously injured in a duty-related traffic accident during a drunk driving investigation. He was scheduled to have surgery on September 22nd of this year. Officer Bernhardt was aware of the injury and was aware that it was to Officer Wilson's hand, and understood that the injury could potentially prevent him from being able to complete his EVO mandatory training for that year. In addition, Officer Bernhardt needed defensive tactics certification for the year, as it was getting towards the end of the year and he hadn't completed it yet. We believe the evidence will show that Officer Bernhardt looked to take the easy way out, that he looked to take a certain advantage over Officer Wilson's situation, and sent a text message, which will be included in the evidence offering, what unfortunately has become a pretty common term we've heard in the news, which is quid pro quo, offering to sign off on the defensive tactics requirement for Officer Bernhardt if Officer Bernhardt would certify and sign off on the EVO training that Officer Wilson needed due to his injury. Officer Wilson declined, indicated in the message that could get them both fired. Officer Wilson then reported the conduct to the chief, Nate Lamar, and shortly after, in that message exchange, once it was made clear that he was declining, Officer Wilson was declining to go along with that deal, Officer Bernhardt began to backpedal, tried to kind of change the context, and indicated that what he was referring to was exchanging viewable training materials, which in some cases could be an alternative to mandatory in-person training. However, going back to when the previous chief was in place, Chief McCain, there is a written Delphi Police Department policy that that training has to be done in person, and viewable materials are not an acceptable substitute. It's our position that this conduct violated several written rules. You read them out loud into the record. We also believe that the conduct crossed several criminal code thresholds, crimes for at least attempted perjury. Since there was no actual signing off on it, there was an attempted perjury, an attempted fraud, and what I believe to be official misconduct, which is a level 6 felony. At the conclusion of this hearing, I'll be providing members of the board with the Indiana code, so you can see the definitions for those crimes themselves and make your own determination from that. Also, based on past performance records, Officer Bernhardt was already a marginal officer in terms of performance. With the offer to exchange essentially fraudulent signatures, certifications, it's our position that the entire department's integrity gets called into question. It could potentially stain the reputation of the department to keep an officer such as Bernhardt involved on the department. And frankly, if you can't trust a certification a law enforcement officer makes, then I don't believe you can trust an affidavit or a police report they submit to be clean and accurate with information necessary to make law enforcement decisions. So based on that, at the conclusion of this, we'll be seeking termination.
Good, ma'am. As stated on the record already, my name is Elizabeth Demas. I'm here on behalf of Officer Shane Bernhardt.
Could you speak up just a little bit louder?
Sure, I apologize. First of all, I would say that for the most part, the initial recitation of facts as to what we're here about, as set forth by counsel, is correct. I think where we diverge is that the charges are all based upon some speculative interpretation by Officer Wilson as well as now Chief Lamar. The email the text that was originally placed forth in the charging documents is not the entire text conversation. Our position is that the terminology that was used in the text may have been poor, as we often are texting something that's not as clear as it would be in a written or in an actual oral conversation. However, the subsequent texts from Officer Bernhardt are clear that his intention was for them to exchange instructional materials in order to obtain their training. This is a past practice that has occurred. It is allowed by the Indiana Law Enforcement Training Academy. And if this conversation had occurred in person, that would have been very clear. We believe the evidence will show that Officer Bernhardt was merely reaching out to a coworker who he knew was injured, offering that they could exchange their materials for training and, quote, sign off on the rosters. I think that language is important here, as that is an actual function that occurs from these trainers, and I think you will learn that as testimony comes in, that as an instructor, they instruct their classes, they then have an obligation to report that to the Indiana Law Training Academy. And in doing so, they have certain rosters that they complete. So there is a form that they will fill out, and as the instructor does, they are listing the officers' names who have completed the training, and then they are, quote, signing off on the roster. The same language that Officer Bernhardt used when he was referring this matter to Officer Wilson. It is our position that you will hear evidence in reference to an email that was submitted by who was a prior chief with this department, but was potentially a sergeant at the time. While that may have been an email in terms of his preference as to how training occurred, it is not a formal policy. Regardless of whether that was a policy or not, there will be evidence submitted that this practice of utilizing instructional materials versus the full hands-on training is something that has occurred and did occur following that email/directive. It is acceptable by the Indiana Law Enforcement Training. There are certain circumstances wherein which that occurs, and you will hear evidence of that tonight. Our position is that Officer Bernhardt is here under oath and will testify, and specifically provided that in his statements to the investigators of what his intent was. And this is a position where we now have a situation where we have a separate officer trying to delineate and determine what the intent was of another person. It's our position that that's not appropriate, and it's not sufficient evidence to show that this officer committed any wrongdoing, and we're glad to be here today to be able to explore and explain this situation and believe that once you hear the full gambit of the whole situation and as well as seeing records that are, show the practice of how this training is done, that you will find that he is not guilty of these charges.
Prosecution, would you like to?
First witness will be Officer Justin Wilson.
You may take the witness, Justin, if you would like to take the witness chair.
Officer Wilson, please sit down. I'd like to swear you in, please.
Absolutely.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the information that you are presenting this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as you know it?
Yes, I do.
Please be seated.
Okay, please state and spell your full name, sir.
Justin Michael Wilson, Wilson.
Are you employed?
Yes,
How?
I work as a patrolman for the city of Delphi.
And just briefly, what are your duties?
Right now, I'm on medical leave, but I'm a first-class patrolman. I enforce state laws and local ordinances.
How long have you been officer with the Delphi Police Department?
20 years,
Since 2003?
correct?
And do you hold certain designations in the department? For example, are you a field training officer?
Yes, sir. I'm a
Second.
field training officer. I'm a defensive tactics instructor. I'm also a general instructor. I can teach basically whatever platform they provide me with.
And in order to become an officer, I imagine that you had attended a law enforcement academy.
Yes, I went to the Northern Indiana Law Enforcement Academy in Gary.
And when did you get out of there?
2002.
After you become a law enforcement officer in the state of Indiana, are there continuing education requirements?
Yes, sir.
Can you give the board an overview of what those are?
You have 3 psychomotor skills that are defensive tactics, firearms, and emergency vehicle operations. Those are all of the core fundamental tasks. You have to get 24 hours in total of general education, but you have to get 2 hours of each discipline, which that is going to change next year.
So as of this year anyway, for the calendar year of 2023, when you say 2 hours in each of those disciplines, do you mean 2 hours, for example, of defensive tactics?
Yes.
2 hours of what's referred to as EVO or emergency vehicle operation?
Yes, sir.
And then also 2 hours of firearms, you said?
Correct.
So that totals, what, 6 hours, and then you have 18 other hours
Correct.
that are general education?
Correct.
Okay. You mentioned a second ago that you're a certified defensive tactics instructor, is that correct?
Yes.
Describe to the board what that means.
I basically train officers to stay safe, have a tactical advantage against any aggressors, be able to go from de-escalation techniques all the way into handcuffing and multiple different opportunities to resolve an issue without physicality.
So every officer in the state of Indiana, including the officers on Delphi Police Department, are required to do 2 hours of a defensive tactics training each year?
By state statute, yes.
And how do you make that available as being the person that's able to put on that training?
I'm the only instructor in the county. I try to get all of my training for the year done in January. I offer 4 to 5 trainings in January and then 1 every quarter. Unfortunately, I've been injured a few times this year and have not been able to put on a class for all of the officers as much as I want.
When you do put on classes, where are those at? What do they look like?
Normally, well, they're all hands-on and they're up at the Delphi High School. The school graciously gives us the wrestling room to basically do it at will.
Every year, in addition to the DT, if I say DT, I mean
Sure.
defensive tactics, right?
Correct.
That's what you guys call it?
I would call it the same.
Okay. You also call it emergency vehicle operation, EVO.
Correct.
That's another required 2 hours per year, right?
Yes, sir.
And so that's something, even though you're not a trainer for it, you've done it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, describe to the board what that consists of.
Officer Bernhardt is an instructor in that. Normally, he sets up a course out at the airport. It's a pretty fun course. Puts up hundreds of cones, drive as fast as you want, kind of have a good time out there, hone your skills to avoid like people walking out into the roadway, vehicles that are broke down as you're going on a call. That's what it's supposed to, I guess, show or that you can do.
So it's about vehicle control,
Yeah, absolutely.
safe vehicle.
Absolutely.
Safe vehicle control.
Absolutely.
And are there cones set out, that kind, I think I've seen these things before.
Yeah.
You put like road cones out,
Yes, sir.
leave them, that kind of thing. Sounds to me, in your opinion, tell me if this is accurate, that defensive training and EVOs is better learned hands-on in person.
Absolutely.
When you're doing defensive tactics, is it, do you actually do drills, physical?
Oh, absolutely. I punish the officers like I really do. There's nothing that I can do to them that's going to be as hard as the people out on the road, so I want to make it as realistic as possible so they know how to get through a threat.
Is it, in your opinion, hard to learn how to maneuver an emergency vehicle by reading materials?
It would be very difficult to do something with a book instead of being hands-on with anything.
Well, we heard in opening statement, and it is true, isn't it, that is law enforcement requirements for the state allow some things to be read.
There's a lot of things that the state allows that's ridiculous.
Okay, is there a preference therefore for these things to be in person?
Absolutely, that's why the state is changing them in 2024.
And how is that gonna happen? What is the state changing about
This,
this?
especially with defensive tactics, there's which I could testify to. They're doubling the hours. They're making sure that there is an actual curriculum instead of if I think that people are struggling in you know, a certain situation, I can drill that for 2 hours, but they want to go through specific disciplines over and over, like stances, de-escalation, how to get out of chokeholds, things like that, strikes, etc. And is basically what I have already done.
Your current chief is Chief Nate Lamar, correct?
Yes, sir.
And prior to him was Chief Brooke McCain, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when did Nate Lamar become the chief?
I think in August,
Of this year?
I believe so.
So during, let's say 2019, would that whole year of 2019, would Officer McCain have been the chief at that time?
I believe so.
And were you an officer at that time with Delphi?
Yes, sir.
At some point during that calendar year, did you receive a written notice from, well, I don't know if it was chief or sergeant at that time, McCain, regarding your department, not state policy, but Delphi's policy with regard to those psychomotor trainings?
Yes.
And I've handed out binders, I think each of the board members have them, they're tabbed, the defense also has them, they're tabbed, consistent with the numbers on the exhibit, so that way I don't have to pass it around to everyone can see what's being handed to the witness. This is exhibit number 1, go ahead and take that from me, sir. Have you seen that before?
Yes.
And there's 2 pages, correct? Or is there more than 2?
There's an empty page, but
Okay.
sorry, my thumb doesn't work.
And that consists, it looks like, what appears to me to be an email that was sent to, among other people, you and Sergeant Bernhardt, or Officer Bernhardt, correct?
Yes, most of the members of the department.
And is that exhibit 1, that email, is that the email notice that you received from Chief McCain regarding the requirement for psychomotor training?
Yes.
And the last page of that exhibit, is that the written policy that was attached to that email?
I believe so, yes. Yes.
You know Officer Bernhardt, correct?
Yes, very well.
And you've been with the department since, you said 2003. How long has Officer Bernhardt been with the department?
I believe over 18 years.
Around 2005, sound about right?
Probably so.
Prior to him joining the department, did the 2 of you have any connection to each other? Did you know each other?
No.
And what about while he's been with the department? Did the 2 of you ever socialize, interact outside of?
We're
work?
friendly, but we don't hang out or go to any activities together socially.
Like, for
I
example,
change.
you ever been to his house before?
I mean, I've been to his house, but not like more than 5 minutes or something, just stopping by and saying, hey.
Are
I
there
don't-
Go Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't believe he's ever been out to my house.
You guys, are there different shifts with the department?
Yes.
Have you primarily been on the same shift, different shifts?
We've consistently worked different shifts from the majority of my career. He's worked by himself most of the time on one shift. I've worked on a different shift. And so we barely get to see each other or interact other than in training and things like that.
But over 18 years, even if it's just occasional, it's fair to say that you've gotten to know them at least to some
Well,
degree.
sure, absolutely.
And you get along with them?
Yeah.
In fact, I think besides what's going on here today, I mean, generally you like him, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And isn't Mr. Bernhardt or Officer Bernhardt's a pretty likable guy?
I
right?
think so.
You know, socially he gets along with others, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Have there been issues while you've been with the department together with Officer Bernhardt related to his job performance though?
Absolutely. I mean, he wouldn't be the only one. And on a small department, everybody has their issues.
And what's your, in terms of working together with them or even just being in the same department, kind of the reputation, opinion, that type of stuff, how is Officer Bernhardt viewed as a law enforcement officer?
Respectfully, my opinion shouldn't matter of what it is, but I have a reputation, he might have a reputation, like, I want it to be about the facts, but I'll answer your questions if you really want me to.
Well, as it pertains to his performance of his duties.
I think that that would be better left for a supervisor.
Understood.
Okay.
At some point prior to September 22nd of this year, were you involved in a duty-related car crash?
Yes.
And were you engaged in an investigation at that time?
Yes.
What happened as a result of that car accident to you physically?
I broke my wrist and my arm in 11 spots. I have 2 plates, 8 screws. Today I just went to the doctor and I have to have another surgery because I can't get my thumb to work. So that's on January 2nd, just to let you know.
Was that known to other people in the department?
I hope not.
Well, what I mean, not by the surgery date, but your injury.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, people knew that you were out, right?
Oh, sure.
Was Shane Bernhardt aware of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what day, did you have a surgery back in September?
On the 22nd,
On that day, did you have any communication with Officer Bernhardt?
unfortunately.
What do you mean by that?
Prior to me going into surgery, I received a text message from Shane. He inquired basically if I had received my my emergency vehicle operations training for the year. And obviously I haven't because he's one of 2 instructors for the year, and I was previously injured.